A big thank you to mpb.com for sponsoring this week's video. Hello everybody, hope you're all well. Would you like to watch a video which is really disjointed, to be honest, with some mediocre photography thrown in? Yes? Perfect. Coming right up. Now I feel like I start most of my videos these days by saying, do you remember? But do you remember last week when I mentioned this lens? This is a 40mm f1.2 from Voigtlander. It's a manual focus lens, FE mount, and lots of you have told me about this lens in recent months throughout my quest to find something a bit more interesting to shoot with than my Sony. If you've not been watching previous videos, I love the output of my Sony cameras and I'm not looking to replace them, but I'm looking to find something that doesn't have to be super expensive, but just something that's a bit more fun to shoot with every now and then, because the Sony stuff, to me at least, feels quite serious. So I'm looking for something that feels a bit more, fun. And lots of you have suggested that I might not need to change my camera, I might just need to use a different lens on the Sony bodies. And this is the one that people have suggested on the basis that it's 40mm, which I love, and f1.2, which is fun, and it's manual focus, which is, in theory at least, engaging. Anyway, the other week, as you might remember, I was in Denmark, and on my last day, I decided to take this lens for a spin. Try it out. Although you do spin it, I suppose, because it's manual focus. Here's some footage. Now, before we get into this, I should probably say that I do have a couple of trepidations about this lens. Firstly, using a manual focus lens on a very fast autofocusing body like a Sony A7 is perhaps a little bit odd. Maybe this would work better or suit better a Leica M-mount camera, for example. And number two, at f1.2, the image is quite soft, which I suppose is to be expected. But what I have found in the little bit of testing that I've done so far is that one of the best ways to work out what is in focus is to check where the quite obvious purple fringing is. And that's not great either. But yeah, I'm interested in the shooting experience more than the image quality at f1.2, I think. I'm much more likely to be shooting this lens at sort of f2 than f1.2. But just some early on thoughts. Look at these clouds. Let's kick things off at f1.2, shall we? Be rude not to. f1.2. Something in there will be in focus. The pastel colours, I mean there's footprints everywhere, which kind of sucks. Then again, I think some of them are mine from yesterday. Adds kind of a human touch to the image as well. Well, the light's getting a little bit harsh now, as you might be able to see. Thoughts so far with this lens are that I like it, it's good fun, but the focus throw is quite large. Compared to Leica lenses, for example, where you might have a quarter of a turn or half a turn, this sort of feels like it goes on for an eternity, which means, particularly at the wider apertures, you spend a long time adjusting focus, and I don't necessarily like that. And also on a morning like this, I don't trust myself to shoot at the really wide apertures because I'm not going to be here much, and I don't want to mess up the focus, which I'm sure I've done a lot. But good fun. It's a good fun lens. Right, we've left the lighthouse now, and I just got Mass to pull over because we drove past some dunes that look so soft against the light, the sort of diffused light, because the sun's kind of in high cloud at the minute. So I thought I'd come and try and take a shot. Hopefully it's worth it, because this is an uphill walk. Oh, it's not really that far uphill, I'll be fine. Beautiful. I thought that was alive. terrifying. It's looking at me. We've stopped by the side of a lake here, and I think it's one of the strangest places I've ever been. The architecture of this building, which is like a toilet block and an office building as far as I can work out, is wonderful. I found a couple of shots that I really quite like. But yeah, taxidermy, I don't really like. Scares me, to be honest. And actually things got even weirder when I went to the toilet. Did you have wildlife in your cubicle?
Yes.
Okay. It wasn't just me then. No idea. I think I was probably a little bit harsh on reflection about the softness at f1.2. It is actually quite sharp, and yes, it does look quite sort of soft and glowy and dreamy, but it's sharp where it is focused. So that is quite impressive, but there is a lot of fringing. Can be fixed in post, but yeah. Also, I was probably a little bit harsh about the focus throw. It's not a half turn, but it just feels like a lot because the lens is quite big compared to like M-mount lenses, for instance. So when you're using wider apertures, it does feel like you're turning a lot if you want to throw from like infinity to something close up or vice versa. It does feel like you're spinning the lens quite a lot, yeah, which I didn't really like. Now, I back myself at not very many things, really, but I do think I'm quite a good judge of whether a camera or a lens is good for me quite quickly. I feel like within the first sort of half an hour of using something, I know whether or not I'm going to enjoy using it long term. That said, I have been wrong before. My X Pro 3 I really didn't enjoy in my first couple of outings, and it was only the third, fourth, fifth time that I was using the camera that I thought, yeah, actually I do love this, which rocked me. And so I was conscious not to judge this lens after a morning, basically. So in the afternoon, we drove back to Copenhagen towards the airport where I was going to get my flight from, and we stopped off at a tiny little town near the airport. I say we, Mass was with me, and yeah, I did some more shooting. We walked around lots of wonderful yellow buildings, exactly my kind of subject, as was that massive tomato or strawberry, whatever it was. And I didn't really enjoy using the lens. And I don't understand why. Basically, everyone who loves this lens, I completely understand why you do. Great fun, brilliant performance, especially when stopped down. But I don't know, for some reason it just didn't do it for me. And I think sometimes with cameras and lenses, it's hard to put into words why that is. And it's why it's so important whenever you can to try stuff before you buy stuff. Because on paper at least, this is perfect for me. But for some reason, it didn't quite click. Oh, it does click. Aperture clicks, but you know what I mean. I promise that this little search for a fun camera or lens, it's coming to an end. I know I've spent way too much time on this channel trying to find this setup. It's probably getting quite tedious. Anyway, in summary, fantastic lens. For some reason, I don't know why, and I can't put my finger on it, but I can. It's not for me. Don't know why. Now, luckily for me, I didn't buy this lens. I borrowed it from my good friends and the sponsor of today's video, mpb.com. Now, as you'll know, if you've watched this channel for a while, MPB have been a sponsor for a little while, and a few weeks back, I went to go and see them at their warehouse for some meetings and stuff, but also to have a tour of the warehouse. And Ian, who's a fantastic photographer, I've linked him below, he works at MPB, and he agreed to show me round. And well, I thought I'd give you a sneak peek too, because, I mean, do you remember when you were a kid going around a library? And it was on the one hand quite exciting because there was lots of stuff that you'd never seen before, and on the other hand it was boring as hell because it's books. What kids like books? Lots of kids like books. I didn't, unless it was horrible histories, all gory and blood, and it was always fun. Anyway, the MPB warehouse is not a library, and there's no blood, but here's a little tour.
this is basically a multi-purpose area, I would say. So this is where the packages come in, but also where they go back out again. So obviously in the beginning part of the day, we get the kind of morning delivery, and then all the packages kind of get sorted. And this, I would say, is probably, I guess, the beating heart, if anything, because it's very central. So it's kind of in between two key areas of the warehouse. But this is largely where all the equipment gets checked by our product specialists. So I would say they would all get roughly the same thing. So they all get lenses and cameras, but there are people here that are kind of maybe more specialist in other things than others. So for example, there might be someone who shoots Leica and they've been shooting Leica for years, so it makes sense for them to check the Leicas. Same with drones, and same with maybe telephotos or very specialist equipment like digital backs or medium format equipment, for example. Maybe less so now because it's become quite normal to have a medium format camera, but like maybe more complex medium format cameras, digital backs, Hasselblads, phase ones, that kind of thing. So everything gets split. So it goes from here, where we basically find out what the equipment is, and then it gets fed to these guys who will then check the equipment. We do have a very specific checking process in terms of kind of what we're looking for, and that's pretty specific to each bit of equipment. So obviously with lenses, for example, you're checking for things like optical defects on the glass, things like dust, which is not that big a deal. But things like fungus, for example. So obviously you've got to shine a torch behind, and or should I say on the rear element and on the front element to check for any defects in the glass. And then obviously you've got to check autofocus performance if it's an AF lens, stabilization. So you've got to marry that to the right body to make sure that both things are working properly. So every bit of equipment is very different. And obviously with drones, for example, we have to actually test them to see how everything is working. And we do have a dedicated area down there where we can actually fly drones, yeah. And this is our lovely dispatch team. So I can actually show you one of the workstations if you want. Basically the item comes here, and obviously it will come labeled so we know kind of what that is. And yeah, we don't use any plastic at all here. Everything is recycled materials, cardboard, even the tape that's used for the boxes is all recycled material. 4, 2, and 2. And there it is.
Yes, it's the one. Pretty cool warehouse that, isn't it? Tens of thousands of pieces of camera gear. Amazing. And this little lens will be going back there. Anyway, thank you to mpb.com for letting me borrow this and for showing me around. And if you're in the market for some new camera gear, used camera gear, then definitely check out mpb.com. Anytime I'm looking to buy a camera or a lens, which as you know is quite often, I check out mpb.com because they recirculate hundreds of thousands of pieces of gear every single year. They operate in lots of different countries. I've listed them below. And if you're looking to sell some gear to free up some money to trade in for some other stuff, or maybe to go on some photography trips, then definitely check out mpb.com too. It's super simple. You can get a free and easy quote online for all your stuff. And if you're happy with that quote, you send it in to them. They assess it as you saw. They'll then confirm your quote. And if you're happy to go ahead, they'll just send you the money. It's fantastic. So yes, whether you're interested in buying or selling some camera gear, check out mpb.com. Links in the description. Next week, I have absolutely no idea what we're doing, but photography, I imagine, so I'll see you then. Oh, also, I always forget to ask this. Please subscribe if you haven't already. I'd really appreciate it. Yeah, see you next time when we'll be, who knows where.